She never intended to wound a fellow soul. But the instant Eliza Thorne stirred awake that evening and sensed the damp warmth of her own blood seeping through her gown along her flank, she couldn't recall a single detail of how it had all unfolded. She grasped just one certainty. If she halted her flight, some dread shadow would at last overtake her. A handful of hours prior, she had alighted from the locomotive at Willow Bend, carrying little more than a fragile dream woven from correspondence. A vowed union, a fresh start, a gentleman who professed he would cherish her tenderly. The church chimes tolling as if in personal salute to her arrival. Eliza trusted every line in those missives. She trusted she had discovered the spot where her tale would truly commence. She was mistaken. It commenced when she uncovered the initial deception, a solitary envelope left ajar upon his writing table, her name inscribed in a script that chilled her to the core. She scanned the phrases over and over, yet their import remained unaltered. Another had designs upon her, designs she was never intended to glimpse. The murmurs followed, fellows beyond the pain murmuring, disputing, inquiring whether she might resist, whether she might cry out. The sort of queries that revealed all she required to comprehend, queries no intended spouse ought to overhear. Eliza retreated from the casement, her heartbeat thundering, her fingers quivering so fiercely that the pilfered note nearly tumbled from her grasp. Perhaps they hadn't spied her as yet. Perhaps a sliver of time remained. Perhaps she could flee. She did. She eased through the rear entrance. Her footwear struck the earth firmly. The darkness carried a tang of iron. Grit clung to her palate, akin to gulping down earth. Her chest seared as she faltered over the meadow. She claimed no provisions, no flask, not even her valise, merely the revelation she was forbidden to peruse. She pressed on until her limbs gave way. Then she tumbled, cheek pressed to the soil of a territory unfamiliar to her. When at length she raised her gaze, she beheld naught but an endless line of timber barrier, a hushed homestead. No lanterns, no murmurs, solely the echo of her own terror resounding within her ribs. Eliza hauled herself onward, one inhalation, one inching advance, one silent plea at a stretch. She attained the barrier and slumped once more, murmuring phrases she yearned another soul might catch. Please, not him, not this eve. But the plains offered no reply. In its stead, a fellow's silhouette draped over her form, and a resonant timbre declared from overhead, "You ought not linger here, miss, not during these hours." Eliza stiffened. It rang like a caution, and she held no clue whether she had stumbled upon refuge or plunged into peril deeper still. Eliza couldn't say how much time had elapsed as she lay there. She knew only that the earth grew icier with each respiration, and the timber overhead resonated with an unnatural calm for an unfamiliar who had just encountered a woman scarcely aware amid the muck. When she at last compelled her lids apart, she beheld him, a sturdy-framed gentleman poised in the threshold of a time-worn homestead, outlined by the faint radiance of an oil lamp. He regarded her as one eyes a tempest one dares not rely upon. He sought not her identity. He extended no solace. He merely exhaled and remarked, "You've chosen the bleakest spot to collapse, miss." Then he approached her as if he divined she possessed no further strength to bolt. She attempted regardless. Her digits clawed into the loam as she shoved herself rearward, but her frame declined to comply. Agony lanced up her flank, keen and fierce, and she stifled a gasp she wished he hadn't detected. The gentleman kneeled alongside her, examining the rent material beside her thigh. Crimson saturated the weave in a somber ring, a minor gash, yet inflamed and extended. His gaze sharpened ever so slightly. Then he slipped an arm beneath her spine and hoisted her from the ground ere she could protest. Her tone fractured. "Set me down."
He refrained. He bore her to the veranda as if she were featherlight, placed her upon a timber seat, and fetched a tin ewer brimming with liquid that appeared unduly frigid. Eliza clutched the seat's border, pulse racing. "What are you intending?" His retort arrived even and weary. "Preserving your life. That injury is slight, but it's soiled." His palm grazed the frayed weave, and she recoiled so sharply that he halted. Then he uttered the phrase she would carry etched in memory for all her days. "It's far too minor to claim you, but tending it will be swift. Such a scrape merely stings fiercely. Remain steady." She sought to withdraw, but his palm guided her back with a gentleness that brooked no refusal, firm, yet devoid of malice or haste, simply assured. He cleansed the stain with deliberate motions, and each contact caused her breath to falter. She sensed the sting of the spirits he applied, potent enough to blur her sight briefly. Her flank pulsed relentlessly, foretelling she wouldn't stand upright for a day or so. Dread constricted her breast. A flicker altered in his regard, something nearly compassionate, though it evaporated as swiftly as it appeared. Upon completion, he bound a slender band of linen about her midsection. Only then did he withdraw and truly survey her. Grime upon her visage, alarm in her stare, the missive gripped so tenaciously in her fist that the sheet had creased to mirror her palm's curve. He inclined his head toward it. "Fleeting from peril, miss?" Eliza gulped deeply. Should she confess the facts, he might cast her into the chill once more. Should she fabricate, she might perish ere dawn. Thus she posed the sole query of consequence. "Sir, will you return me to the one who dispatched me hither?" The homesteader contemplated her at length, and the evening seemed abruptly attenuated. For the expression in his eyes conveyed a caution, and Eliza held no inkling what toll he might exact next for sparing her existence. "I cannot return there." He inquired not the cause. Instead, he entered his dwelling and emerged bearing a pristine vessel of water. "Partake of this, miss. Your timber resembles coarse stone." She accepted the vessel with unsteady grasp. The initial draught scorched her gullet. The second one brought tears pricking her eyes, which she willed not to descend. As she set down the vessel, he observed her still, not with warmth, not with disdain, like one weighing whether to shelter a wandering creature or drive it from his domain. He declared, "I am Jacob Hale. This spread is my own. I harbor no fondness for strife. I do not beckon it within. Should you remain, you labor. Should you deceive, you depart. As straightforward as that." Eliza regarded him, her digits clenching the vessel's edge. She endeavored to quell her apprehension. She endeavored to convince herself that she might rely upon a gentleman who spoke as an arbiter and glided as a spectre. But ere she could voice a word, Jacob extended a hand and softly wrapped the missive she clutched. "That item in your grasp, it bears truth or falsehood. Which prevails?" Her respiration snagged. She unfolded the parchment, the very one that had broken her realm mere hours past. She displayed not its contents, but murmured gently, "It prompted my escape. It preserved my breath, and it may draw seekers to this threshold." Jacob released a prolonged, languid sigh. Then he voiced a sentiment that pierced her deeper than the evening's bite. "Gentlemen pursue betrotheds, not from affection, miss. They pursue from possession, and souls of that ilk yield not readily." Ere Eliza could reply, Jacob strode to the veranda's brink and surveyed the shadowed meadows. His bearing altered, shoulders aligned, palm hovering nigh the aged sidearm slung by the portal. It was the mien of one who had confronted peril afore, confronted it intimately.
He pivoted toward her and stated, "Should hazard arrive, it announces itself not politely. Thus, reveal to me presently, are you prepared to abide here and defend your existence? Or do you intend to bolt anew when the breeze veers?" Eliza sensed her pulse climb to her throat, for she discerned in his timbre not ire, not trepidation, but something elder, as if he foresaw precisely the brand of turmoil approaching, perhaps for he had embodied it once. And had she fathomed Jacob Hale's essence ere the sun crested, she might have fled afresh, or drawn nearer still. Who can say? Before we press onward, pause for a breath, savor that cup of brew you've got nearby, and tell me, what hour marks your day as you lend an ear? From what corner of the world does this tale reach you? For the ensuing pair of days the spread lay serene. Eliza toiled in the scullery, proceeding with caution as her flank yet throbbed. Jacob observed her at intervals with the deliberate scrutiny of one gauging threat. Each dusk, ere repose, Eliza detected footfalls upon the veranda. The planks groaned beneath his tread, and the gust bore the aroma of parched meadows and bygone tempests, a fragrance Eliza was gradually coming to dread as keenly as he. Not footfalls, merely a subtle transfer of mass, as if Jacob lingered there, attuned to the zephyrs, tallying inhalations in obscurity, awaiting an unnamed presence. On the fourth dawn, peril manifested. It arrived as haze upon the lane, ascending tall in the wake of trio of horsemen. Eliza espied it foremost. Her respiration lodged in her windpipe. That shade of haze arose solely from riders who spurred fiercely and urgently, riders intent upon claim or capture. Jacob emerged outdoors, dabbing perspiration from his forehead with his sleeves reverse. He traced her gaze, the sinews of his mandible tensed. He uttered a lone term indoors. Eliza stirred not. She identified the foremost rider ere he drew nigh enough to discern his countenance. Victor Lang. Her innards knotted. All from which she had fled now advanced unerringly upon her. Lang reined his mount to a halt afore the veranda. Afternoon hail, he drawled it leisurely, near amiably, yet his gaze warmed not. It glided beyond Jacob and fastened upon Eliza like talons. Jacob advanced a half-pace, shielding her from sight. "You hold no welcome here." His timbre elevated not, yet an undercurrent prompted Lang's companions to fidget in their seats. Lang reclined, feigning delight in the air's caress. "I've merely come to reclaim my due." He motioned toward Eliza. "The lass, she entered my abode under vow. Her tenure was brief, yet that alters not the circumstance." Eliza experienced the declaration as a buffet. She essayed to emerge from Jacob's shelter, but he raised a palm, restraining her with care. "None possesses her. Not henceforth." His temper was subdued, unwavering, excessively so. Lang chuckled. Then his mirth extinguished when Jacob's palm settled upon the weathered pistol by the balustrade. A slender hush spanned the yard, the variety preceding a gale that rends asunder. One of Lang's retainers dismounted and seized Eliza by the wrist. She uttered a startled cry, more from surprise than injury, ere wrenching loose. Jacob surged swiftly, swifter than one of his years ought to, and with a brisk advance drove the base of his palm into the fellow's mandible, a strike keen enough to buckle him to a single knee, insufficient to render him senseless. The other reached for his firearm. Eliza pondered not. She emitted a piercing call, seized a modest culinary blade secluded in her pinafore, and aligned it against the limb restraining her. Not profoundly, merely enough to compel the fellow to recoil. The abrupt prick disrupted his poise long enough for Jacob to wrest the weapon from his clutch and hurl it to the ground. Lang immobilized briefly, a spark of awareness in his eyes, as though he had at last recalled the moniker Jacob Hale, the figure once murmured in tales of the Shadow Gulch fray. Lang's visage shifted. "Hale? Jacob Hale of Shadow Gulch?" Lang glowered at her. His timbre splintered with fury. "You think he can safeguard you eternally?" Eliza felt the atmosphere change as Jacob advanced, gaze glacial enough to congeal a stream. "Perhaps he can, perhaps he cannot, but you ought beseech fate you never compel him to demonstrate." Lang wrenched his mount's head and retreated his steed. "This concludes not, far from it." He departed, his retainers hastening in pursuit. The haze engulfed them, but the menace lingered. Eliza regarded Jacob, pulse galloping. He returned her look with an enigma she couldn't decipher, something shadowed, something she pondered whether she wished to fathom. For the first instance, she questioned what kind of gentleman could daunt Victor Lang sufficiently to spur his flight, and what might transpire when the remainder of Jacob Hale's history emerged from obscurity next. For an extended instant after Lang's withdrawal, the spread seemed uncannily tranquil, the sort of hush that weighs upon one's frame. Jacob tracked the haze dissolving into the distance, then at length turned to Eliza with an expression novel to her. Not ire, not trepidation, but something elder. He stated, "You acquitted yourself well yonder. Most souls stiffen when peril exhales upon their nape, but you held firm." Eliza averted her gaze, limbs yet quivering from the surge. "I merely acted as necessity demanded." Jacob inclined his head. "That marks survival's path." He mended the barrier near which she had slumped. She conveyed him refreshment, and at intervals he bestowed a subdued glance. A peculiar accord prevailed betwixt them, not affectionate, but sincere.
That eve, Eliza perched upon the veranda's treads, contemplating the expansive pastures. The firmament's lights gleamed more vividly than memory held. The breeze wafted scents of fodder and solstice. Jacob emerged and positioned himself adjacent. He seated himself not until she signaled assent. He remarked, "Lang shall return. Fellows of his stripe invariably do." Eliza swallowed resolutely. Her timbre quavered, yet her declaration faltered not. "Then we shall confront him upon his advent." Jacob vented a subdued exhalation. In that juncture, he appeared elder, more wearied. He at length disclosed the verity. He had orchestrated the heists, wielded the arms, endured nights as a phantom in evasion, inspired dread in others, borne errors that haunted his vigils. Eliza turned not aside. She murmured softly, "A gentleman comprises not the tally of his deeds past. He comprises the tally of his choices forthcoming." Jacob contemplated her as if none had ever proffered such wisdom. By week's close, the matinal vault arched in soft amber, and therewith arrived a modest assembly from the adjacent settlement, guided by the parson who had gleaned word of the fray. Lang had fallen to custody. The missive Eliza had unearthed now served as testimony the lawman withheld from granting impunity, merely the occasion to articulate his account afore a true arbiter. Not absolution unearned, but the grace a soul merits by emerging from concealment. At length, it constituted liberty merited, and as the documents bore seal, Eliza sensed a tension ease within her breast. She beheld Jacob not as the rogue of whispers, but as the gentleman who had contended for her when all others abstained. Seasons hence, as the solstice's gusts mellowed, Eliza discovered herself anew upon the veranda, positioned intimately to Jacob. Existence seemed attainable once more. She inquired, "Do you hold that souls can truly evolve toward grace?" Jacob replied, "Solely if they crave a pursuit worthy of alteration.
Then he regarded her in a manner that steadied her pulse. And perhaps therein lies the moral, dear listener. At times, life bestows tempests. At times, it bestows unfamiliar faces. But occasionally, it bestows an opportunity to recommence. What path would you select should that opportunity rap upon your threshold? If you've lingered thus far, I'm grateful this narrative held you near. A gentle tap to like, a nod to subscribe. And let us journey onward as one. Refill that cup of yours.